All I can say is those Roman soldiers were made of some tough stuff if they could carry this for 18 miles. Everything else must have been a piece of cake. In the year 107 BC, the Roman general Marius completely reformed the Roman army. Up until Marius made his changes, the Roman army was a part-time army which coalesced whenever there was a threat. The threat was dealt with, and the soldiers, who were primarily citizens and landowners and important people, melded back into their daily jobs and functions and went on business as usual until the next threat presented itself, in which case they came back together again and dealt with that threat. And the cycle continued. The Romans realized that this wasn't really the way to do it, and they needed a standing army. So Marius was tasked with the job of getting the Roman army up to par, making it a standing army which trained year-round, which was ready at a moment's notice to take off, and whose soldiers were second to none when it came to military tactics. Now, one of the changes that Marius made was that he decreed all Roman soldiers needed to carry their own gear. This is the part where I became interested, because as a backpacker, I'm always interested to see how people carried gear in an historical context. The Romans had the technology to create a backpack for their soldiers to carry their gear, but they chose not to do that. They went a different route. Now, I want to just backtrack for 1 second. Because the soldiers, prior to the formation of the standing army, were citizens and were, important people, they didn't carry their own gear. They carried their basic items, but everything else was carried by mule train. And sometimes these mule trains were 500 mules long, and it became problematic because, number one, the mules traveled at their own pace, and number two, it just became a huge lumbering target for any barbarians that were lurking in the shadows to attack. And Marius realized that this would not do. The Roman soldier had to carry his own gear. And let me tell you, he carried a lot of it, up to 50 or 60 pounds of gear. The soldiers themselves later became known as Marius's mules because of this. But because they did not use a backpack, they had to come up with a different system. So what they decided to do was utilize something called the furca. Now the furca, F-U-R-C-A, was basically a long piece of wood, 4 feet long, this is what the historians tell us, with a 20-inch cross piece mounted about 3 inches from the top. And they had another item which attached to this, which they called the sarkina, which means satchel, and the sarkina was mounted to the bottom. It was usually made of leather. Let's also just keep in mind that I'm not an historical reenactor. I'm dealing with concepts here, and I'm going to use modern equivalents, anything that I have around, in place of the actual Roman artifact that would have been used at that time. So I'm using this bag as my sarkina, which I will show you a lot of the items that they carried in it, how they mounted some of their other items, and the main advantage of carrying your gear this way and not by using a backpack was because you could also carry your weapons. No, this is not a pool cue, this is a javelin, and you could carry your weapons, and it was carried in this fashion. And if you needed to ditch your supplies and get into a defensive posture, you could easily do that with the furca. Now, let's talk about some of the items that the Roman soldier carried. Let's put it all together the way they would have suspended the items onto the furca, and then let's take it out for a little spin. First item would be a wool blanket. Now, the wool blanket was indispensable for the Roman soldier. He used it as a cloak, as an article of clothing. He used it as a shelter, as a ground cloth, and as a sleeping system. No Roman would be caught without a wool blanket. The major component of this would have been the food, because the food would have had to have been enough for long marches. So they would have carried probably 7 to 14 days worth of food. It would have been grains such as rice or barley, maybe some beans, lentils, that kind of thing, dried meats. So I'm going to start packing some of these items in. I've got some canned items here just for the weight. Each one is a pound, so just to make it easy, I'll put 1, 2, 3, 4 pounds of canned items in here. Add the rice, another pound of rice, pound of lentils, and pound of beans. I can see already this is getting a little on the hefty side, but they would have had to have carried some spare clothing and repair items. So we know that the Roman soldiers, especially once they got to the colder climates up north, wore socks under their sandals, so they would have carried spare socks with them. They would have carried underwear, so spare pair of underwear, undergarments, shirts, etc. And they would have carried leather straps to repair their gear, tighten up their furka, fix their sandals, etc., etc. So these items were also indispensable. They would have been carried in some kind of a sack like this. So that's what we'll do here. They would have had a fire kit, and it was primarily based on iron pyrite or quartz or some other hard stone, and a piece of iron. Here's a bit of pyrite, a bit of quartz, and they would have had some char cloth with them as well to catch the spark. So basic, simple fire kit, but every Roman soldier had one. So we'll put that in the sarkina. They would have carried a net with them, like a net bag, and it would have held their water, which was probably held in a goat skin. I don't have a goat skin, I don't have a net, but I do have a paracord net and a platypus bottle, so this is as close as I can make it to the ancient Roman canteen system. So we'll add that to our furka. They would have had a cup of some sort. It would have been a metal cup, most likely bronze, something like this, and they would have had a cook pot. So metal, bronze is a bit, on the heavy side. This is a little bit lighter, but I'm starting to already feel empathy for the life of the average Roman soldier, because this stuff is getting heavy, and I'm nowhere near as heavy as they would have made it. They would have had a hygiene kit. An important component of that would have been a very small comb. The comb was not for, making sure they looked their best when they went off into battle. It was for picking out lice, which was a huge problem. And they would have had, some cord with them. They would have had a knife. They would have had the basic items. Usually these things were worn around their belts. Basic items which you would expect anyone going either out into the woods or out into battle to carry with them. So let's put all of this stuff together in a system now based on how they were mounted on the furka pole, and let's take it out and see how we fare. So here it is. Everything is mounted to the furka. It's designed so that, as you can see, the blanket is on the top bar. The sarkina hangs down with gravity, so it actually is supported by your upper back. Quite comfortable, actually. But let's see if we can find a place, some empty field somewhere, where I could take this for a little bit of a spin without looking too much like an idiot. So here we are. Found a field. Pardon the wind noise, and I'm using a selfie stick and my cell phone camera, so don't know what the quality is going to be like, but basically this is what we look like here. Well, I'll tell you, it's comfortable, but there's no way I'd want to do this for 18 miles carrying 60 pounds. All right. It's also about 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Not the most comfortable day to do this kind of a test. The things I do for YouTube. All right. That's enough for me. I much prefer a backpack. Well, fortunately I didn't get attacked by barbarians or anything because I left my lance at home. All right. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you again on the next one.